All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Happy New Year. Before we get started, just a couple of reminders. We will have time for questions at the end of the presentation. You can type those in by clicking that Q&A box or the chat section in the lower portion of that control panel. We will be posting a recording of the webinar on our blog. The link for that will be shown at the end. And if you would like a PDF copy of the slides, there will be a link to download those on that same post as the recording. And as always, if your question does not get answered today, or if you think of any new ones, please email our support inbox, which will be shown at the end as well. All right, so what is on our agenda for today? It's a new year, right? New year, fresh start for many of us. So really no better time than to talk about our mindset going into it. We're going to talk specifically today about locus of control. For those of you unfamiliar with the term, we'll talk about what it means. We'll talk about how it can affect your life and your health. And then we'll talk about what you can do in your life regarding your own locus of control. So what exactly do I mean when I say locus of control? There are a few different definitions, but they boil down to the same thing. The extent to which you feel that you have control over events that impact your life. So the concept was originally developed by a psychologist named Julian Rotter in the 50s and 60s and came from what is called the social learning theory, which suggests that we learn from observing what goes on around us, which leads us to form beliefs that a specific behavior results in specific, a lot of times predictable outcomes, right? We learn by watching. If you have an external locus of control, you believe mainly that the forces outside of you are responsible for much of what happens to you personally. Things like fate, things like luck, the circumstances you're either born into or move into throughout your life. If you have an internal locus of control, you feel like your personal decisions, your actions, and your efforts guide much of your life. What you do affects the outcomes that you get. Now, while some people believe very strongly one way or the other, most of us aren't fully on one end or the other, right? Most of us fall somewhere in between on that spectrum. And I'm going to mention this a few times too, but our locus of control can be different in different settings and situations. So just keep that in mind as well when you're thinking of your own locus of control. So what does this mean? What does this mean for you? How can your thoughts on what controls the path of your life affect you? Well, research has found pros and cons of both external and internal locus of control. Now, to summarize, where there's technically no correct locus of control, internal seems to have more advantages than external. If you have external locus of control, again, meaning that you don't think you have as much control over what happens to you, the main pro is that it can be easier for you to let go of stressful events and situations. If you don't think your actions affected what happened and that something else caused it, it kind of makes sense, right? If it wasn't your fault, then why should you let it bother you? There's no regrets. There's no thoughts of what if I did that type of thing. It can be a more freeing way to think. But the cons of having more of that external locus of control tend to outweigh the positives. People with this mindset tend to credit luck for their successes, and they tend to not give themselves credit for their own hard work. They also typically don't believe they can change their circumstances. If you don't believe that you have control of what's going to happen to you in your life, what do you think could happen? Well, if you think that no matter how hard you work, that it's not going to change your outcomes, do you think it's going to be worth continuing to work hard? Unfortunately, not in a lot of situations, right? This happens a lot with our health. If you believe that genetics is going to control how healthy you are and whether or not you can improve something like your cholesterol or other areas of your health, it tends to affect how hard people try and actually take steps to improve what they can to be as healthy as possible, right? And just to clarify, we do know that genetics do play a role in our health, but we also know that our behavior can 100% affect things in a positive way. So let's just clarify that. But that's what I'm talking about with that external when it comes specifically to health. If you don't think what you do, what your actions are going to have any outcome on how long you live, for example, it's going to be hard to get that motivation, right? Learned helplessness is another term that people use in this situation. So this is when a person who has experienced repeated challenges just comes to believe they don't have any control, right? Then they give up almost trying to make changes and accept their fate, if you will. This is a sad reality for many people, right? Some people absolutely do come up against a ton of challenges in their life, and it's hard not to fall into that learned helplessness. But for those of you who feel like you may be in this category or close to that category, there are ways that you can work to improve your situation and your mindset. I promise. We're going to talk about those here shortly. But first, I want to touch on internal locus of control and the pros and cons of this mindset. So like I mentioned earlier, internal tends to be the preferred mindset based on research. So let's talk about why this is. People that feel like their actions affect their outcomes tend to be less influenced by other people's opinions. They tend to have stronger self-confidence and self-efficacy, which is just self-confidence in specific situations. This makes sense with the internal locus of control, right? If you believe that you're the one that controls your outcomes for the most part, you most likely tend to think that you can do what's needed if you work hard enough. And then in general, those with that internal locus tend to be healthier and happier overall. Again, this makes sense. If you're someone who believes that your actions can influence your physical, mental, emotional, social health, whatever it may be, you're more likely to take action to improve in those areas if you think that you can, right? Now, again, not everyone is fully 100% on that internal locus of control train. So there's not a lot of people walking around who are saying every single result of my life is because of what I do and I'm amazing, so my life is perfect. If you are one of those people, fantastic. But those that tend to lean this way, at least to that internal, thinking they have some control, are typically more positive. They typically have a healthier outlook on life, and they typically make more decisions that positively influence their overall well-being, okay? One con that can creep up, or a couple of cons actually, that can creep up on those with an internal locus is when something doesn't go their way. Let's say you make a decision and it turns out to be not so good. Like I said, those with external locus of control can more easily move on from this because they didn't really think they had much control over it in the first place. But those that think their actions control more of their outcomes, this can be a big downer sometimes, right? They can internalize this failure and it can add some stress, at least in the short term. Now, long term, like I already mentioned, those with an internal mindset locus of control tend to have less stress and anxiety, but this can still be an issue that pops up when we internalize those failures. Another thing to be mindful of is those with an internal locus may not seek as much support or help. If you think you're in control, it makes sense that you may not think that you need that help, right? Or you say, if I just do this or work harder, it's going to work out. As we know, this isn't always the right mindset. So we need to be able to ask for help when we need it, right? This turtle may have caused himself to flip over and he knows it, but he's going to need to ask for some help, right? And we just need to be able to acknowledge when we need some help if you've got that internal locus of control. So next comes the question, what is your locus of control? Some of you might know right away what you are, but it might not be as clear cut for everyone. Now, there's multiple questionnaires online that can give you an idea, and I just put a couple examples of some statements that you can either agree or disagree with that can give you an idea of where you lie on that spectrum. So for the internal, if you work hard, you can achieve anything. There's no such thing as fate. And then external. In general, I feel I have little control over my life, and it's not worth setting goals or making plans because too many things can happen that are outside of my control. Now, again, these statements are both pretty extreme examples, but just see what you tend to lean towards. And I do encourage you to do a quick online search for locus of control scales and questionnaires that can give you more in-depth if you're not sure kind of where you stand. And again, like I said, what your mindset is can depend greatly on the situation you're in. At home versus at work, for example, can be almost complete opposites of what you think your locus of control, how much you control. Okay, so if you kind of thought about where you're at, let's talk about where you might want to change. So depending on where you fall on the scale, there may be times and situations when we wish we had more of that internal locus. I'm going to focus on internal because, again, it's pretty widely accepted that this is where we want to move typically. So what can you do to help change that mindset, to move more towards that internal locus of control? The first tip is to work on developing a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. So a growth mindset is when you're looking to improve yourself in some way. This can be with specific hobbies, at work, with your health, wherever you want. Having a fixed mindset is just thinking, well, it is what it is. My talents are what they are, and you either can or you can't, and you don't need to improve either way. This pretty much mirrors our internal versus external loci of control, right? The reason working on this mindset is helpful with going into more of a growth mindset is that when you're looking for ways to improve your well-being in whatever way you want, you end up working on things that are in your control. Let's say you want to improve your 5K walk or run time. You think, okay, I'm going to add one more jogging session to my weekly routine, or I'm going to add 2 more minutes, or I'm going to try to go a little faster. That action that you just did is in your control, and it will directly help improve that 5K time, right? You just had an internal locus of control, thought, and action. Continue to practice and be mindful of giving yourself those small goals that are in your control to continue to improve in areas of your health. And you'll have that growth mindset, and that locus of control can start to move internally. Embracing failure. This one can be tricky and tough sometimes. Nobody wants to fail, right? So people with an external locus of control tend to look at the probability of failure in situations. And if there's a chance of failure, they're going to try to avoid it, right? Even if the reward could be really great. They think it's going to be luck or fate that makes them succeed or fail, and they don't want to risk it. But here's what you do. If you embrace failure, again, I'm not saying it's easy, but if you can reframe failure as an opportunity to learn, then you can turn what seems to be a negative into a positive. We learn from every experience we have, good or bad. If you start to embrace risks and see that your actions can lead either to success in that situation, but even if you don't succeed, if you can come out with a new perspective or lesson learned, then you still control the outcome of that situation personally, right? You controlled your part in the success, or if it wasn't a success, you controlled letting it teach you a lesson to have better control in that same situation or similar situations next time. Make sense, hopefully? On the same thread as this, working on taking responsibility for outcomes, good and bad, is important as well. This is a strategy that helps foster that internal locus because it makes you stop and think about how your actions affected the outcome, right? If it was a negative outcome, it can be easy to place that blame on some outside factor, right? And it can be easier to move on if you do that. Well, that's not always great in learning and growing, right? What if something that you did had a part in that outcome? Likely it did. Most of the time it will. So just taking time to think through situations, how your actions and behaviors played a part can help you realize that you do have more control than you think. What this also does is it helps you take an active role if the situation needs to be fixed, And then it can help you develop stronger relationships by either coworkers or your loved ones by showing them that you want to help try and make the situation better or solve the problem. So we have a win-win there, right? We're growing personally, we're taking control, we're moving that internal locus, and we're working with others, we're building those relationships. Next is changing your self-talk. If you're constantly telling yourself, I have no choice, or there's nothing I can do, it's going to be hard to change that locus of control. So having positive self-talk and focusing on things that you do have control over, or working to find things that you can change or change how you respond, is a small thing that can have a really big effect. Now, changing this starts with being mindful of your self-talk first, and then finding those negative examples of, like I said, I have no choice, there's nothing I can do, and starting to turn those around into positive. So again, all of these processes take practice. It's going to be a slow process, but this is where we want to go to help move to that internal locus of control. And then find some inspiration. When you see someone that's similar to you achieve something great, it can be really inspiring, right? So find examples online or wherever it is of others like you taking control of their situation and doing something maybe that you would like to do. See what they did, see what actions they took, and use that as a model of what you can do in your own life to change and achieve something. Now, to be clear, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more. This is different than comparing, which we're going to talk about, like I said, in a minute. This is simply seeing someone else succeed and using it as motivation. So be sure you know the difference and don't take it as a negative when you see someone else succeed before you get. I'm going to talk about this more, but I just want to clarify that a couple times. This is just to get inspired. Hey, if they can do it, I can do it, right? So we've talked about a few different ways to help shift that locus of control. To end things today, I want to focus on that one word in that phrase, control. Specifically, let's talk about controlling what you can control. An internal locus of control doesn't mean that you control every aspect of every situation in every part of your life. It's about learning to control what you can control and not letting things truly outside of your control affect that personal journey. But let's be honest, it's easy to feel helpless sometimes, right? It is. There are so many things happening in this big circle, in the world, in your country, that you seemingly can't do much about. Pandemics, natural disasters, those big world events. And the news focuses on negative events because that's what sells. That's what people are drawn to, unfortunately. And when we are constantly told about bad things happening, it can be hard not to move towards that mindset of, well, I don't have any control with this, right? And that can have a not so good effect on our personal lives. And then to add to this, a lot of times when we're on social media, this is where that comparison comes in. We see how seemingly great everyone else has it, right? We're seeing the highlights of someone else's lives, and then we start to compare it to theirs. It's what I just mentioned. Sometimes we see others succeed and our mind goes in that negative direction. We think, man, they have all the luck with their great lives. So our mind can easily move into that external locus, right? Our motivation can go down, which is the exact opposite of what we want when we're trying to maintain and improve our health. So what can I do? Okay, first, I want you to think about what you can control or affect in your life. Stop thinking big picture and start thinking small. Start with you. What can you control in your life? Take some time and even write it down if you want to, or at least think about it. What small things do you affect and influence in your daily life? Behaviors and habits are a big one, right? What time you wake up in the morning, what you eat for breakfast, what you pack for lunch, whether or not you exercise that day, whether or not you stop and think about what you're grateful for. You have direct control over a lot in your own life. So your goal is to start to change that mindset. Stop worrying about what other things affect your life and start thinking about how you affect your life. And absolutely, yes, there's going to be some outside things that have some influence on your day, your work schedule, your family schedule. But is there something you can do to affect your day in a positive way? Absolutely, every single day there is. And then once you feel in control with parts of your own life, you can expand that into that next immediate circle of family or friends, whatever it may be. Are your actions rubbing off on them? Can you make healthier meals for your family? Can you ask a friend to exercise with you? Can you mow your neighbor's lawn or shovel their snow? You can positively affect many people in your own circle. And who knows, that's how we grow and eventually make changes in those bigger circles. That's how we change the world. Corny, but it's how we change the world as we start where we are, right? So build that foundation today. Start today. Your eating, your exercise, your sleep, your stress management. Think about your strengths and how you can set goals around them. Pick somewhere to start to make a tiny, tiny change to something that you can control today, then another one tomorrow, another one next day, so on and so forth, until those tiny habits that make up your day show you how much control you do have over your life and your health, and in the end, your happiness, which is what we all want, right? That's the point. And then along with the habits, attitude. The quote goes, life is 10% of what happens to us and 90% of how we react to it, right? Working on how we react to what does happen around us, maybe things that aren't as much in our control, can change our mindset in an extremely positive way. Looking at what we consider failures or bad outcomes and looking for that lesson like we talked about, or the positive, is certainly not easy, not by a long shot. I understand that. But once you acknowledge the sadness, the frustration, the pain of whatever situation you're going through, you work through that with support of others, however you need to work through it, and then take time to reflect on what you can take away from it, then you start to build that positive mindset and internal locus of control. You controlled how you reacted in the long term, and that's huge. So let's go back to that comparing one more time. When we compare ourselves to others, when it comes to what success means or what healthy means, we take away all that internal control. Okay, when we're talking about health, wellness, self-improvement, there is zero reason to compare ourselves to others. You only need to compare yourself to the person you were yesterday. Again, sounds corny, but it's absolutely true. If you look at someone else as the standard of success, that is completely external locus of control. And you will never have success because you are not that person and you will never be that person. And you shouldn't try to be someone else. When we try to measure against someone else, it's also easy to find ways to slip into that external locus by saying what advantages they have that we don't. Oh, they don't have any kids, so they have more time to exercise and meal prep. Oh, they make more money than me, so they can afford that workout equipment. We're setting ourselves up for an excuse to not work hard at simply bettering ourselves. That's a big one. And again, none of these things are as simple as snapping your fingers and saying, oh, I'm not going to compare myself. But if you can catch yourself doing that, you can start to change that mindset. Comparison is the thief of joy is another quote for you. We do it all the time and we kill our joy. So here's that goal. Stop comparing yourself to anyone. It's hard, right? We're slapped in the face by ads, by social media feeds that tell us every day that we should compare our lives to others and we should buy this product. We should go there. We should do this. It's everywhere. But every time you can talk yourself out of thinking that your life will be better if you do this, if you buy that, if you travel there, you're going to take a small step forward in your life and it's going to be that much better, more content, and more in control. And again, we can draw inspiration from people who succeed, but we have to change our mindset about what we see when we see them. There is enough success for everyone. We don't need to be jealous of someone else for getting it. We need to focus on our own journey. There is success there for us too, if we want it. And then to help with that, find your support. Find those people who you know that they're in your corner and they can help build you up when you fall. They're going to help build that confidence in you that you can control your health, your destiny when it comes to improving things like physical health, mental health, emotional health, whatever it may be. All right, to sum it up, I'm just going to throw a couple quotes at you and then add one more here. So we've got comparison is a thief of joy. We've got the reaction in life, but also if you want different results, don't do the same things. Now, Albert Einstein is quoted for this one. I don't know if he's the only one who said it, but he's a pretty smart guy. But it's something we see a lot, right? People that aren't happy with where they are, yet they continue to have that external mindset that they can't change or do something differently. So to end, make that your mantra. I am in control. You're in control of so much, even if it doesn't seem like it now. Find those small ways to regain control for yourself. And if you're not on the path that you want to be, find those different actions you can take and you will get there. Find your own definition of success as well. That's a big one. All right, upcoming webinars, and then we'll get to some questions if anyone has any. Next February already, fitness at home. We're going to talk about just what you can do in your own home to stay healthy without needing to go to a gym or anything like that. And then fat, good or bad, right? What's the deal with fat? We're going to dive in a little bit about the different types of fat, which kind is good, which kind you kind of want to stay away from, and we'll get some good recipes in there for you as well. And then if you do have lifestyle rewards points for watching the webinar, if you have to answer questions, most of you probably don't, but if you do, it will pop up when you go to submit. These are the questions. If you need these again, they will be on those slide decks that you can download once we get the blog post up. So I'm not gonna, if you can't screenshot it quick, I'm not gonna stay on here too much longer. If I need to go back, you can let me know. And then here's our contact information. We are on social media. The blog is the big thing to watch past webinars from past years, register for upcoming webinars. So you've got that. And then you can always reach out. Give us a call to chat with a health coach. You can email us. We're more than happy to chat about any goals, or again, if any other questions pop up after we get done today, you can always reach out.